Welcome to another episode of Home Sweet Home. My name is Rod McCall.
And I'm Scott Nichols.
How's it going?
It's going fine.
Well, it's another day of living and walking around, so I guess that makes it a pretty dabbling good day.
Yeah, it's getting warmer. So loving that.
Yeah, I've had my fill of winter. I've had my fill of snow. And yes, I'm just done. Welcome to warm weather.
I've definitely learned over the years that I do not like the cold. Having lived in Florida for 14 years, I'm not sure why I moved above Florida. But I do like it out here, except for the cold.
Yeah.
I hate cold.
Luckily, it's only a couple of weeks.
Yeah. I mean, yours and my definition of cold might be different.
Yeah. Well,
if it's under 70, to me, that's cold.
Okay, fair enough. Would you say that you learned this through trial and error?
Oh, absolutely, right? Like I lived up north for a long time, and then I moved to Florida, and then I'm kind of like partway between as far as latitude goes, and I definitely prefer the Florida sunshine. And
okay. I can agree
despite
with
being
you.
born in that other area.
Oh, well, yeah. I'm not a fan of snow and cold and sleet and ice. No. So, because I learned that it was not a whole lot of fun to do that kind of shoveling, walking, driving. And my memory says, yeah, it stunk.
So you emphasized the word learn twice now, so I'm guessing that has something to do with what you want to talk about today.
Well, way to pick up on that. Yes. I guess I'm not very subtle, huh? Kind of like a Mack truck. But no, I was reading a thing, came across my newsfeed a while back, and I thought, this is kind of intriguing. And it was talking about how our learning, how we learn influences how we remember.
Okay.
And so there was pull my tongue from between my teeth. The article was written by a lady by the name of Kate Roberts, PhD.
Okay.
And she's from your neck of the woods. She graduated from Boston University, got her PhD from Rhode Island University, and now does some consulting work at Massachusetts General Hospital there in Boston.
Oh, it's a great hospital.
Yeah, everything I keep hearing says so. And so I thought, as I'm reading through this article, she was talking about how, again, our memory, and I keep having some issues with my memory of things that I remember, and my ability to recall facts and figures is not as sharp as what it used to be. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, this would be kind of interesting. Well, when I dug into it, it turned out, it had a different point of view, but it was basically saying what we remember is based on how we learn.
Interesting.
And so, I mean, she said that it's not that the learning and memory are not synonymous. You can't translate one for the other, but they do go hand in hand. And so I thought, maybe we could dive a little bit into what she's talking about here.
Okay.
And so part of it is, basically she's talking about there's two types of ways that we learn.
Okay.
I mean, and a part of reading through this, they were talking about like the Myers-Briggs, and you can do your type learning. And when I was at Amberton University, that was a huge part of their concepts of if you know how you learn, then you can work, you better understand yourself.
Sure.
And so I'm an ENTJ, which the J stands for judging. And yeah, I'm pretty judgy. But they say a lot of teachers are judgy.
They can be.
So maybe that has something to do with it. But I thought it was kind of intriguing because the types, when she was going beyond that, though, she said there's two basic types. We learn either as an auditory learner or as a visual learner.
Okay.
So my first question would be, are you an auditory learner, do you think? Or are you a visual learner?
I mean, I'm not entirely sure. Like, what how would we define those two things?
Okay.
I mean, is it just like if I see it, that's a thing, or is it in conjunction with using my hands, or
Well,
how does if I'm just listening to podcasts or audiobooks, is that suggesting the auditory side?
okay. No, that's actually kind of valid. So when they're talking about a visual learner, yes, you're seeing it, but you're doing it.
Okay.
You're kind of, when you're reading it, well, in fact, I'm going to just read straight from this.
Yeah.
That you often remember better when you're seeing it.
Okay.
If you're a visual learner, which
Okay.
I am. I have discovered that, yes, I am. I got to be hands-on. I got to be doing it.
I'm trying to decide what I am.
Okay. But you can visualize the information, remember it better when you're reading it, and you can process and relate it to something.
Okay.
They're saying that visual learners can actually create images, and they store those memories with those images, and it's kind of a relationship, which is what I do.
Sure.
If I can relate it to something, if I can tie in, Sherry gets on me. She goes, "You don't need to ask me this all the time," but I try and tie in and relate what I'm reading to something I already know.
Sure.
And so as a visual learner, I use that to gain and process and store the memories of what I'm reading and what I'm learning.
Okay.
So that's a visual learner. An auditory learner is somebody that can hear it, and they can, just by listening, they can store that information, hearing it read aloud. For example, hearing a story.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I tell a lot of stories, but an auditory learner can learn from that. They can hear it, and then they can store those memories, and they can then recite that information.
Okay. So given the fact that I prefer physical books to audiobooks, and I prefer to be able to sometimes, even though I consider it sacrilege, to actually like highlight in my book, to moving to things like having a visual schedule in front of me. I like to have that schedule that has actual graphics and places and times, and I've become very effective with that. I'm gonna go with the visual that I want to see it. I want to be able to go back and see it again. I want to be able to make those connections from the visual side of.
Okay.
Now, I'm not saying that I can't learn the other way. I'm just saying that I prefer to learn that way. Like I have listened to audiobooks. I just don't remember it.
Well, yes, there are things. I love my audiobooks for entertainment. And on the way to and from work or wherever I'm going, I listen to my audiobooks for entertainment value.
I feel like I'd have to listen to them over and over again. Like, so for like on the audio side of things, you listen to songs over and over and over again, right? And that's why I can still remember songs from 1985 that I haven't listened to in 25 years, because I listened to them so much back then that it's just part of my memory. So repetition.
Sure.
But I'm not going to listen to an audiobook 5, 6, 10, 15 times.
Oh.
I just don't do that.
Oh, I do. But here's the thing, though. If it's not entertainment, all of my textbooks for the master's program, I physically got and I read page by page, highlighted, underlined. Yes, it is a little. I would not do it in an entertainment book, but in a scholarly book, I mark it up.
And I do too. That's part of how I go through that process.
And so, but
I think I'm auditory. Visual. Sorry,
visual. Okay. So you went that. Okay, that makes sense. What they're saying is that, there's a lot of different ways you can assess your learning style, but your learning style, like it says, helps determine how you process the information that you're getting.
Okay.
And it's then in how you process that information that influences how you remember.
Okay.
And I thought that was kind of interesting as, again, I'm trying to figure out why am I not remembering things. But I'm starting to, as I read through the article, I thought maybe this is the wrong article to help with that part of the problem. So, but I thought it was kind of interesting. We work with kids a lot. And why they say get away from the lecture format. Because when you and I were in school, everybody was all, the teacher gets up and they lecture for, 50 minutes. You're busy scribbling down notes from the overhead.
Sure.
And you're supposed to remember. Well, you and I don't think we come anywhere close to teaching like that today.
No.
And
rarely will I lecture for any length of time. And if I do, it's about information download.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, I usually give the kids some form of notes that maybe they fill in so that they're not having to get it all at the same time. Maybe that's the visual piece of it, right? Like you can actually see it while I'm doing it. So you can kind of do both types of learning, but it's never, when you want to get into a complex concept, doing a lecture isn't necessarily going to be the best way.
And this Kate lady was saying, it kind of fits in with that the idea that being just expecting everybody to remember what you say. I mean, the kids tune me out within 10 minutes. So I try and chunk it. And we tell a little story. I relate a little what we're talking about. And then boom, I'm going to have you do it.
Right.
And then we're going to come back and then we're going to talk about what you did and kind of sum it up a little bit. But I thought that it was kind of neat that it was talking a little bit about how our brain uses our learning styles to influence our memory and helping kids, by having like what you and I do, we do a variety of different things in our class period so that way, if your strength is auditory but not visual, you get some. And if your strength is visual versus auditory, you get some. And then if you're a kinesthetic learner, which also I am, well, now you're actually doing.
Right.
And so kind of like what they say, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. Well, that's kind of what they're saying here. You find the way that they can learn and remember, well, then ta-da, you're helping them for a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was kind of neat. So that's kind of where I was going with this stuff today, is helping if we can. I think as adults, as parents, we want to help our kids be successful.
Right.
And why are they frustrated at school? Well, because school becomes hard. Why has school become hard? Because their ability to remember is the information being presented might not be presented in a way that helps them remember well. And how many problems do you have? If kids are fine coming to school because, it's not so bad, they're doing, that's not a big battle. But if the kids are struggling in school, they don't want to go to school.
Right.
And so now you've got a big problem. And like I say, as parents, we want to help our kids. And so I thought, well, how are they learning? How do they remember? How can we help?
I think what's interesting is, in our teaching field, right, we have run into a lot of this, maybe not specifically presented this way, but we've run into a lot of this where we're told, don't do long lectures, like you were saying. In fact, research, and I don't have the specific research, but just in general, like over the years, research has suggested that your lecture time, direct instruction is what we call it. Should be like 15 to 20 minutes tops, because people lose attention, right? So when you're hearing something, you basically just lose focus after 15 to 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And so you need to stop. And that's why, in the education field, we have these things called brain breaks, where you do something and then you stop, right? And this is true even if you're doing like reading. So reading the statistics or the research suggests a 20 to 30 minute time frame before you would lose your attention. A lot of people read for 30 minutes at a time in a book. And that's probably why, right? They lose focus. I've gotten my stamina up to like an hour
that's
at
pretty
a time,
good.
which is, and some of that depends on the material, right? Like
Yeah.
sometimes it's just a super boring or crappy book, right? So,
Mhm.
but you have to take breaks. And so a lot of times we find ourselves, our mind wandering or something. It's probably an indication that like you're losing the focus.
Mhm.
And you need to go to something else. And so, but what's interesting is that when you combine an activity with those things,
Mhm.
the attention span, right? The focus attention span increases.
Interesting.
On those. So, when you add in that activity, which is why, we're always telling teachers, you need to have an activity.
Mhm.
You need to have the kid work with whatever it is you're doing.
Yeah.
And for us as history teachers, that's kind of weird because we went through college and it was
Memorize.
it was lectures, read, take notes, write a paper.
Mhm.
It wasn't, the writing of the paper was the last thing. There wasn't like some kind of sorting activity or any kind of thing that was taking place. It was mostly individual. And so I think that like as social studies teachers, it's hard sometimes to create that activity format.
Okay. Yeah.
So, but whatever you're doing, whatever you're learning, I think there's probably evidence out there to suggest that if you do something, you'll remember it better. So, for example, like a song,
Yeah.
I can read the lyrics. It means nothing to me.
Mm-hmm.
But if I sing along with it, I'm actually doing something.
Well,
That's why I remember it 35 years later.
what I find, that's why when as a government teacher, one of the things that I do all the time, we talk about how a bill becomes a law.
Mm-hmm.
And we go through the steps, blah, blah, blah. We talk about the value and what each step means and what it does and how it works. But when it's all done, I pull out Schoolhouse Rock.
Yeah.
I'm just a bill. Hit on
And by the time they
Capitol
get to
Hill.
us, they've heard that a whole bunch of times throughout school. But
Well,
they still love it.
yes, they
right?
do.
I mean,
yes, they do.
still
And
love
so, but that ties in what you were just saying.
Right.
And that all works really well until you discover that maybe you're dyslexic. Maybe you have ADHD. Maybe you have a real learning disability. And when you have that, now things become a little more challenging because
Sure.
when you have a learning disability, now it moves beyond just being an auditory or a visual learner. Now you need to have more input, more tactile, hands-on learning. You need to have more sensory input so that way that memory of what you're trying to learn or trying to teach, depending on where you're coming from, allows you to have that imprinted in your brain so that you can then retrieve it.
Right.
And so I like what they're saying here because it helps give influence or impact onto, again, when we're trying to help our kids, learn and process through school. Well, what is your strength and what is your weakness?
Mm-hmm.
And try and, assist them. And that's why I like our working with our special education partners here at school is that they've helped me better understand, how to, is not just, fewer questions or stuff like that, how to create a lesson that benefits them. Because if you benefit them,
Right.
how many other people are you benefiting, giving them more tactile, hands-on, to whatever it is you're trying to do. Don't just lecture, but let's build.
Right.
And so I thought that was, again, I like that.
I think that's where, in education, and we could talk about how this might relate to parents in a couple of minutes, but I think that, with education, we do a lot of things where we give choice.
Yeah.
And so we might give a choice that's more visual or more auditory for a learning assignment, right? Getting to the same result. Or you might have one that's kind of combined and doing that. And that's, this is where the job of a teacher is difficult, right? Like people think that we just come into a classroom, manage a class for 90 minutes or 50 minutes or whatever.
Then we're done.
We just repeat whatever's in the textbook. Like none of that's really true.
Well, not the good teachers anyway.
We have to tailor it to the students that we have in the room.
Yeah.
And for high school teachers, that means maybe doing it differently, even 3 times a day.
Yes.
Or some high schools 6 times a day.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of work, but you have to, give some options, right? So that students can pick the one that works best for them. And I especially do this when I have extra credit, right?
Yeah.
So, which I don't often do, but when it is available, I want to make sure that there's a lot of choice in how you're going to achieve that. And it's, I don't know how that relates to parents. I mean, I've been a parent for a long time. I think, maybe giving kids some kind of choice when you're trying to teach them something is important too.
And that's part of that. And that's part of what I liked ultimately about this article was it was talking about, and I'm going to read right out of her final sentence.
Okay.
In fact, many miscommunications occur in relationships, both parent-child and parent-parent, because of misunderstanding of each other's learning styles and capabilities, all of which impact memory. And I think to even Sherry and I, she'll say, well, don't just tell me. I need you to text it to me. I need you to put it on the calendar or send me a calendar invite. You just can't tell me and expect me to remember. Well, that fits into learning style.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of the same way. Maybe you can tell me and maybe I'll remember, but maybe I won't. And therefore I need to see it. Which goes back to more that visual rather than, and so like just today, she said, okay, what do you got going next weekend? I said, I don't know. So I pulled up my calendar, nothing on my calendar. And she goes, okay, well, next weekend on Saturday, we've got this going. And I said, okay. So I put it right on my calendar just to make sure, because we were talking about different things, like during spring break.
Right.
And because for us, spring break came a week later. And so the normal things that we do got turned around. And I was making plans without talking to her, and she was making plans without talking to me. And it created a little misunderstanding. So part of it is communication, but part of it is memory. Well, I know I told you. Well, no, you didn't.
My wife tells me things all the time that I know I don't remember. So when I ask her and she's like, but I already told you that. I'm like, that's great. And, with those same amounts of words, you could just tell me again. Because clearly I didn't know, or I wouldn't have asked. So I either didn't hear you or I didn't listen or whatever. But, you'd think after all these years, but she probably gets sick of repeating herself. So, but on the flip side, right, like, I guess that goes to those things. My wife will be on the computer doing something and she gets frustrated with something she's not able to do. And she's like, how did you do that? And I'd be like, well, I want to go over and show her how I did it. And she's like, don't show me, just like tell me how to do it. And I'm like, but I really can't do that. Like I'm not really good at just giving instruction on how to do it. I have to like give you the instruction and show you while I'm doing it, because otherwise I'm going to mess it up. But she's really good at just like hearing what she needs to do and then do it. And so like we've got this conflict of probably of different learning styles where I just, I can do things wonderfully on technology, but I'm not always good at just saying, this is how you do it. Especially from across the room. Like I have to see what's happening.
And that is where this comes down to learning styles.
Right.
And the idea that, again, which is why I liked her this Dr. Roberts' final statement, that it influences not just kids, because we've talked about that, but also, again, our more adult relationships.
Right.
So, but anyway, that's pretty much sums up the article. But it also, I'm a memory guy. I remember, though not as much. But again, it comes down to how do I relate it? My learning style influences my...
Do you think that your parenting style relates to this at all? Do you think that how you engage with your your kids. I know your kids, the kids that you have in the house are grown. But like, how do you think engaging with kids would be? How would this help anybody with that, do you think?
Well, I think it comes down to what are your expectations? And if you're setting those expectations, if you can say, okay, how is this child going to learn? For example, maybe you have a chore chart. Maybe it depends on their age too. But with adult kids, it's a way different. And being a step parent makes it a little more challenging as well. Mm-hmm. In which case, a lot of times we'll just communicate. And I'll talk to my stepdaughter and I'll say, okay, and I'll ask some questions and try and figure out, and if she gets a little testy, well, I'm just trying to make sure that I understand and plan accordingly and mm-hmm. let you know what we're doing. I think if you're dealing with little kids, I think a chore chart, which allows for both auditory and visual.
I think little kids might be a little easier, but, like in elementary school, I know teachers there, they repeat things frequently, right? Like this is how we enter the room and this is how we leave the room. And so there's a lot of practice and visual sense of this is how we do these. So, I kind of wonder, like for the parents that have kids that might still be throwing a temper tantrum in a public place, like I wonder if there could be options like we were talking about where it's like, how are we going to learn this?
Well,
or how do you figure out?
When Eric was little and he would do stuff like that, I would tell him, you can continue what you're doing, and mm-hmm. you and I are going to go into the bathroom, and we're going to have a very unhappy conversation.
Sure.
Or you can stop what you're doing, and we don't have to have that conversation at all. Mm-hmm. Because we had one time, I did it. He was misbehaving. We went into the bathroom where we were out of the eye of the public, mm-hmm. and I sat him on the counter, and I told him in no uncertain terms that this is not what we're going to do. And I said, we're going to have a loss of privilege. Mm-hmm. And he did not like that conversation, and he did not like the loss of privilege. And having done it, then all I had to do was say, hey, do we need to do that again?
Right.
And it worked pretty good. Now, again, he was, 6 and 7 years old at that time. 5 years old? I guess 5 years old.
But again, that wasn't just an auditory command, stop it. Right? Which clearly always, every time somebody tells you to stop it, you immediately think, I've done something wrong. I should stop it.
Yeah.
That's probably not what people are thinking, right? So, but you had a separate action of, we have two choices and, mm-hmm. and, we went into another space and made that explanation. So there was an action associated with it that probably made him remember that a little bit better. And so just getting back to that action piece, right? Like there was, and it doesn't seem like much. We don't think of that as being an action that's going to cause a memory, right? But mm-hmm. like that separate action, mm-hmm. I think is what cements the auditory piece. Hey, you need to stop it.
Exactly. And so I don't know that it tied in with his learning style, but it turned in with my learning style, and it benefited, and it worked pretty good, at least with him, for behavior modification.
So I think that what's interesting is that I don't think that, I pulled up another article that discusses learning style, like, because we can get trapped. We can think that our kid can only learn one way.
Okay.
And that's not necessarily true. Like we're not, there's some research to suggest that we're not necessarily born with an innate, bent to only learn auditory.
Okay.
You can adapt it. You may prefer one over the other. I prefer, visual, but I can still learn auditory when I have to.
Okay.
And so I think that, maybe even trying to make sure that kids are learning both ways so that they're familiar with that, because sometimes as an adult, you don't get a choice.
No.
You're going to learn whatever it is, your boss tells you and how your boss tells you to do it. Right. Mm-hmm. So that's important.
Yes, it is.
So anyway, I just kind of wanted to add that piece in.
No, I'm glad you did.
I think it's, a lot of parents are listening, and I think that using this knowledge can help, maybe even help raise your child.
Well, if nothing else, it can make for less conflict and confrontation at home.
Yeah, or more effective
Communication.
Sure.
So,
All right.
Well, I guess then that'll close it for today. So until next time, I'm Rod.
I'm Scott.
See ya.
Bye-bye.